Joining me now is Jason Pack, a retired FBI supervisory agent, and Richard Staropoli, a former U.S. Marshal. Richard, breaking just moments ago, Fox News has obtained the police report that details the manifesto. Mangione wrote that he went after the CEO because, quote, it's targeted, precise, and doesn't risk innocence, and that he chose to do it at the conference because it was an event that, quote, literally extracts human life for money. The hit is a real blow to the company financials. Richard, those are the words of a suspected killer, and it would lead people to believe, and just at first glance, that perhaps he was someone who had UnitedHealthcare as his insurer at one point?
I think that's a correct conclusion, right? This is someone who's expressed a tremendous disdain for corporate America, which is kind of interesting when you think about it, because if it wasn't for corporate America and the fact that his family could gain some sort of prominence and affluence through their business dealings, this kid probably never would have been able to go to those schools that he went to, certainly end up at UPenn. Yet he writes this 3-page manifesto where he expresses a huge disdain for the health insurance industry. Something had to happen with UnitedHealthcare where either they denied a claim or he didn't get the level of support that he thought he should have gotten, or he was simply overwhelmed with too many documents that they asked him to fill out. That's, I think, was the culmination of whatever it was that triggered him to go make himself a ghost gun, follow this guy to New York, and ultimately kill him on the streets of Manhattan.
Well, it'd be interesting, as we've asked in so many other prominent killings, whether this guy was also on some type of drug, whether it was recreational or painkillers or oxy. I mean, it's just, we always ask that question about toxicology. It would be interesting to know that as well. Sure. But Mangione's former roommate described, and this was from Hawaii when he had graduated from UPenn, his last known address was in Hawaii, and this is what his roommate had to say about their conversations. Watch this.
We had intellectual conversations about structural problems that the nation faces, whether they're governmental or corporate.
What were those like, those conversations?
Well, you know, the counterculture that America had in the 1960s made it really clear that we're on a course of action that's destroying the planet, or perhaps how governmental institutions are failing our citizens. These are intellectual conversations that, you know, we enjoyed having.
Jack, I found that comment very interesting, relating back to the 1960s and the structural problems that the 60s, I guess, radicalism kind of laid bare. Your reaction to that from his former roommate?
Well, I think it's interesting because when you know someone, you know them in your context. And so when somebody goes down the pathway of violence, they sometimes have different realities than you knew when they were there before. So I think, as you heard the chief of D's say earlier, they've got to go and start piecing these cases together. So they're going to get search warrants for all of his social media, and they'll be able to see some of not the public-facing messages, but the private-facing messages. And I think that'll tell the story even more as they begin to still investigate this case. The case is not over yet. It's just getting started as far as that part of it goes.
Now, Richard, a lot of people asking tonight, why the seeming reluctance on the part of people who knew him well, his family and other close friends, at least close friends growing up, as far as we know, weren't the ones who alerted authorities to, to him or his possible presence somewhere. Now, maybe they contacted police, but right now we don't know that. But those questions do remain. They obviously recognized their own son in those photos. There's no way they didn't. I mean, would you not recognize the eyes of your child?
Well, I think that's exactly right, but it's not uncommon in any fugitive manhunt that I've ever been in, right? More often than not, when you do have a photograph, it is in fact the family that can recognize this person first, but they're also the ones that are most reluctant to make that phone call to the police because no one wants to turn in a family member except in the most heinous of situations, right? I very rarely have encountered that. Of course, they recognize them, and they probably even had some inkling that something was amiss here. They may not have been aware that he was going to go to New York and actually shoot somebody on the streets, but I'm sure they were pretty much tuned into what his ideologies were, what his thought process was, and possibly some sort of mental status that led them to believe, hey, this kid may be headed down a dark path here. And that's how things unfolded.
Jason, we're also learning tonight from reporting in the New York Post something that perhaps makes this case even more tragic and ironic. Apparently, the suspect's grandfather donated more than $1 million to the Greater Baltimore Medical Center. The Mangione Family Foundation also made large donations to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and the St. Joseph Medical Center at the University of Maryland. Even Loyola's university pools are named after the Mangione family. These were people described as Baltimore royalty. There are a number of families in Baltimore. The Pelosi family, Nancy Pelosi's maiden name, her family were very, very prominent family in their day. But they're very well-known people. And again, we're used to seeing killers who are kind of isolated and they're in their rooms playing video games all day. But this was someone who had enormous privilege.
Well, you can't help what your kids do later on. You can have the best raising that you could get, and then, ultimately he's responsible for his own actions. And so all that aside, like, he is the ultimate one who decided what he had to do. And maybe it sounds like he was out of contact with him for a while, and so maybe they didn't really quite know exactly what was going on. It sounds that way. Well,
it's just my point being, that's a very sharp turn from Baltimore, University of Pennsylvania, master's degree in computer science engineering, to Honolulu, living with some group of people, and then allegedly committing a murder. That's quite a turn. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.